He had every reason to kill him. Saul had thrown spears at him inside the palace, sent soldiers to his house in the night, chased him through the wilderness with 3,000 men. And now, alone in a dark cave, David had the king completely defenseless in front of him. His own men whispered it.
This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said, I will give your enemy into your hand.
He moved through the darkness, close enough to reach him, and then he stopped. This is the true story of a man who had every right to take revenge, and chose something far more difficult. A fugitive who protected the man trying to destroy him. A future king who refused to become what his enemy feared most. What happened in that cave will challenge everything you think you know about power and about mercy. Stay with us until the end, because the final scene reveals what David did decades later when he finally sat on the throne. And when you see it, you may find yourself asking whether you have ever truly forgiven someone the way this man did. If these stories speak to you, please subscribe to ARC Films. It means the world to us. Now, from the wilderness to the cave to the throne, let's begin. David had been one of the most honored men in Israel. He had killed Goliath, led Saul's armies to victory, and married the king's daughter. But Saul's admiration turned to jealousy when the women of Israel sang that Saul had killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. From that moment, Saul wanted him dead. He threw a spear at David twice inside the palace. He sent soldiers to David's house to kill him in the night. David's wife, Michal, lowered him through a window. Jonathan, Saul's own son, warned him that his father would not stop. So David ran. He fled from Gibeah, Saul's royal city, and arrived at Nob alone and without supplies. Nob was a priestly city just north of Jerusalem, where the tabernacle of the Lord stood. The priest Ahimelech saw him coming and went out to meet him, trembling. A man of his rank never traveled without an escort.
Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?
David lied. He told Ahimelech the king had sent him on a secret and urgent mission, and that his men were waiting at a certain place. Then he asked if Ahimelech had any bread he could take. Ahimelech had only the bread of the presence. Only the priests were permitted to eat it. But Ahimelech gave it to David anyway. Then David told Ahimelech,
The king's business was so urgent that I brought neither sword nor spear. Do you have any weapon here?
The only sword here is the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod.
There is none like it. Give it to me.
But David and Ahimelech were not alone. A man named Doeg the Edomite was there that day, fulfilling a religious obligation at the sanctuary before the Lord. Doeg was the chief of Saul's shepherds. He saw everything and said nothing. That same day, David fled from Nob to Gath, one of the 5 major Philistine cities. This was Goliath's hometown, and David was carrying Goliath's sword. When the servants of Achish, the king of Gath, saw David, they recognized him.
Is this not David, the king of the land? Is this not the one they sing about? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s? Ooh.
David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish. So David pretended to lose his mind. He scratched marks on the doors of the city gate and let saliva run down his beard. He was acting like a madman. They brought him before the king. Achish looked at him with disgust.
Look at the man. He is insane. Why bring him to me?
Am I so short of madmen that you have to bring this fellow into my house?
David walked out of Gath alive. David escaped from Gath and found refuge in the cave of Adullam in the lowlands of Judah. When his brothers and his father's entire household heard where he was, they came down to him. Then others began to arrive. Everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered around David. About 400 men. These were people looking for someone who understood what that felt like. David became their commander. But David's parents were old. They could not live as fugitives in a cave. So David traveled east across the Dead Sea to Mizpah of Moab. He went before the king of Moab and made a request.
Please let my father and mother come and stay with you until I know what God will do for me.
The king of Moab agreed. David's parents remained under his protection. It is worth noting why David chose Moab. His great-grandmother was Ruth, a Moabite woman. There was a family connection to that land that went back generations. David returned to the stronghold, but he did not stay long. A prophet named Gad came to him with a word from God.
Do not stay in the stronghold. Go into the land of Judah.
God was sending David back into the territory where Saul was hunting him. David obeyed. He left the stronghold and went to the forest of Hereth. Meanwhile, back in Gibeah, Saul was sitting under a tamarisk tree on the hill, spear in hand, surrounded by his officials. He accused them all of conspiring against him. He said none of them had told him that his own son Jonathan had made a covenant with David. He questioned their loyalty and silence. Then Doeg the Edomite stepped forward, the same man who had been at Nob that day, the one who saw everything and said nothing.
I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech at Nob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine.
Saul immediately summoned Ahimelech and every priest in Nob. When they arrived, Ahimelech stood before the king and defended himself honestly. He told Saul that David was the king's most loyal servant. He said he knew nothing about any conflict between David and the king. Saul did not listen to a single word.
You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house.
He ordered his guards to kill the priests. They refused. Not one of Saul's soldiers would raise a hand against the priests of the Lord. So Saul turned to Doeg, and he obeyed. That day he struck down 85 men. Then he went to the town of Nob itself and put it to the sword. Men, women, children, infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep. An entire priestly city wiped from the earth. One man survived. Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, escaped and fled to David. When he told David what had happened, David's response carried the full weight of what he had done.
I knew that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul. I am responsible for the death of your father's entire family. Stay with me. Do not be afraid. He who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you will be safe.
Abiathar stayed, and he had brought something with him from Nob, the ephod, the priestly garment used to inquire of God. It would prove critical in what came next. Sometime later, word reached David that the Philistines were attacking the town of Keilah in the lowlands of Judah, raiding the threshing floors and stealing the grain. Using the ephod that Abiathar had brought, David inquired of the Lord,
Shall I go and attack these Philistines?
Go down to Keilah. I am giving the Philistines into your hand.
But David's men were afraid. They were already fugitives hiding in the forests of Judah. Now they were supposed to march into open battle against the Philistines. David inquired of God a second time. God confirmed it.
Go, attack the Philistines and save Keilah.
David and his men fought the Philistines, struck them with a heavy blow, and saved the people of Keilah. The people David had just saved would have handed him to Saul without hesitation. He left before they had the chance. David and his men kept moving through the wilderness, never staying in one place for long. Eventually, they reached the hill country of Ziph, south of Hebron, and took refuge in the stronghold there. Saul searched for him every day, but God did not give David into his hand. Then Jonathan traveled into the wilderness to find David and helped him find strength in God.
Do not be afraid. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be suckled to you. Even my father knows this.
David would outlast Saul's rage. God would make sure of it. They renewed their covenant before the Lord, that David would show kindness to Jonathan and his family and never cut them off. Jonathan had loved David as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan went home. Scripture never records them seeing each other again. Shortly after Jonathan left, the Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah. These were men from David's own tribe of Judah, and they handed him over willingly.
Is not David hiding among us in the strongholds at Horesh, on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshurun?
Then Saul moved south with his men into the wilderness of Maon. David heard he was coming and went further into the wilderness. Saul and his army moved along one side of the mountain, while David and his men rushed along the other side, trying to get away. But Saul's forces were faster. They began to spread out ahead of David, closing in from multiple directions to surround him. He could not fight 3,000 soldiers with 600 fugitives. Then, when Saul was about to close in, a messenger reached him.
Run quickly! The Philistines are raiding the land.
Saul had no choice but to turn back. David and his men left the wilderness of Maon and traveled east to the strongholds of En Gedi, along the western shore of the Dead Sea. After Saul dealt with the Philistine raid, someone told him where David had gone. David was in the wilderness of En Gedi. Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went after him. Along the way, Saul came to a cave by the side of the road and went inside to relieve himself. He had no idea that David and his men were already deep inside that same cave, hidden in the darkness. David's men saw Saul enter. They leaned close and whispered,
This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you.
David rose. He moved silently through the darkness toward Saul. He drew close enough to reach him, and with his blade, he cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Then something happened. The text says David's heart struck him. This was the king God had anointed over Israel. Whatever Saul had done to him, that anointing still meant something. He went back to his men.
The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed. Should stretch out my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord.
David's men wanted Saul dead, but David did not let them move. Saul finished what he came to do, stood up, and walked out of the cave. He never knew what had just happened in the dark. David came out of the cave after Saul. 3,000 soldiers were out there with the king. Then David said,
My lord the king!
Saul turned around. David bowed with his face to the ground and asked Saul why he listened to the men who told him that David was trying to harm him. He told Saul what had just happened inside that cave.
Know and see that there is no evil or rebellion in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt me down to take my life. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe but did not kill you.
David asked Saul to look at what he was spending his army and his time pursuing. A dead dog, a single flea. That is how David described himself. Then he placed the judgment where it belonged.
May the Lord judge between you and me. May the Lord avenge me against you. But my hand will never be against you.
When David finished speaking, there was silence. Then Saul's voice broke.
Ah. Is this your voice, my son David?
The king of Israel wept, not quietly, out loud in front of his entire army.
You are more righteous than I, because you have treated me well while I have treated you badly.
Saul had hunted David for years. He had thrown spears at him, sent soldiers to his house, chased him through the wilderness with 3,000 men, and David had just had the chance to end it all. Alone in a dark cave with the king defenseless in front of him. He chose not to. Saul knew what that meant. He looked at David and asked,
When a man finds his enemy, does he let him go unharmed?
No man does, but David had. Then Saul said something he had never said before, that David would be king and that the kingdom of Israel would be established in his hands.
Swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name.
David swore the oath. Saul took his army and went home. Years later, when David was finally king, he searched for any surviving member of Saul's family and found Jonathan's only son, a man named Mephibosheth, crippled in both feet. David brought him to Jerusalem and gave him a seat at the king's table for the rest of his life. Both promises fulfilled, to Saul and to Jonathan. Not because he had to, because he had promised. The forgiveness did not end in that cave. It outlasted the hunt, outlasted the war, outlasted Saul himself. David kept forgiving long after there was anything left to forgive. And so ends the story of David, a fugitive who held the life of his enemy in his hands and chose to walk away. From David, we learn that refusing to take revenge is not weakness. It is the hardest kind of strength. David had the opportunity, the justification, and the darkness to act. And he chose none of it. In a world that tells us to protect ourselves, to strike first, to make people pay. David's story says that the most powerful thing you can do is put down the weapon you had every right to use. We also learn that forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a decision you keep making. Years after the cave, when David finally sat on the throne, he searched for surviving members of Saul's family and gave Jonathan's crippled son a permanent seat at the king's table. Not because anyone was watching, because he had made a promise. That is what forgiveness looks like when it has fully taken root. It outlasts the hurt, the war, and even the person who wronged you. Obeying God does not always lead you to safety. When the prophet Gad told David to leave the stronghold and return to Judah, where Saul was hunting him, he obeyed without argument. Being in God's will does not mean being in a comfortable place. Sometimes it means walking back toward the very thing you have been running from. Forgiveness is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose, repeatedly, quietly, at great personal cost. David showed us what that looks like. From Saul, we learn what bitterness costs. He spent years, soldiers, in the last chapter of his reign chasing a man who had done nothing against him. He died having never let go. The cave that could have been the end of his fear became just another chapter in his obsession. Bitterness does not protect you. It simply keeps you moving towards something that no longer threatens you. There are people today doing the same, burning their own lives down, pursuing someone who has already moved on. If this story spoke to you, subscribe to Arc Films. It means the world to us. Tell us in the comments, which Bible story should we cover next?